Hi everyone. So this is a very unique webinar because I'm having it with people in the future who are going to watch this webinar. Normally I do it with a presenter, and normally I do it in response because that's my design. But a couple of days ago, I was really reviewing everything that I'd learned about relationships over, well, 66 years of life. And I felt this really strong urge to at least record it or share um, the perspectives that I gained, because I don't see them around in many of the other relationship information that's available out there on all sorts of different levels. And I'm not going to be just pulling together everybody else's stuff and, giving it to you in a condensed and focused form. I'm going to be looking at new trends that I see, new things that have come up for me in the relationships that I've had in my life on every level. And within that, give you a heads up about trends in relationships that are emerging and developing out of our evolution as human beings, out of our history, and then begin to bring them down into a practical form where you can, in a sense, align yourself with where relationships are now and where they're going in the future. Because obviously there's a lot of change happening in the world, and at a fundamental level, a lot of that change is happening in relationships. And yet it's difficult for us to, and I'm speaking from my own experience here as well, to pull ourselves out of what we think relationships should be or what they are, and to develop a perspective on what they are becoming. Because even amongst the alternative and the new age scene, a lot of it is the same stuff about relationships sort of energized up or hyped up or put in new clothing. A great teacher of mine once said, a lot of the new age is the old age in drag. And without putting down the old age or the new age, the point is, it's very easy to dress up what we already are programmed to believe or what we already know, dress it up in new clothing and call it new. And that's not what's really happening, because what's happening now is we are entering into a whole new phase of human growth and development and evolution. The world is becoming a new world, not a better version of the old world, but something that's really new. And as I've begun to understand this, as actually real, as something that I'm experiencing as real in my life, not just in my thoughts, the whole nature of relationships has evolved dramatically for me. And even when it comes down to the living of it, I'm definitely a work in progress, like all of us. But it's, a lot of that living of it is really assisted if we can become conscious of what the trends are, so that when the experience of them turns up in our lives, we at least recognize it for what it is. And then, it's easy for us to then align with that and to discover what's really happening in our own lives. So in this webinar, which I'm sharing with all of you in the future who are going to be watching this, and in a sense answering your questions, because I'm tuning in to you, whoever you are watching this, I'm asking to be connected to what you really need now for what I'm talking about to become real for you in your life. I'm not just putting out a bunch of philosophy. I'm sharing what I've experienced and what I believe is evolving to the best of my ability to add value to what your experience is. because one of the huge trends is that's now emerging is that we're all realizing, and I mean the word realizing, we are all becoming really deeply connected with and living in our lives the fact that we are unique individuals. Now, we're not deeply into that. We're on the edges of that, but that is becoming very, very real now. And it's clashing with the fact that we all try to fit in, and we're all brought up to fit in and conditioned to fit in, you know, to be what they call homogenized, and we're not. And when you look at relationships and what's evolving in relationships, that becomes really clear. And as I sort of unfold what my journey has been and what I've learned about that along the way, hopefully you'll begin to become clearer and clearer about how that is happening in your life, whether you're aware of it consciously or not. Hopefully this will help you become more conscious, you know, of what really is happening rather than what you think should be happening, or what you think actually is happening but it isn't. Okay, so my journey with relationships started early on, you know, when I was a child, being brought up in a traditional Catholic family with great parents, you know, and great brothers and sisters. I have no doubt about that. But their values were very much of the traditional Catholic Australian mould, you know, which is, you know, you get married and you have children, and sex is for marriage, and relationships with other people in business and in other things should be done ethically and morally in the way that's correct. You know, so there were very strongly formed boundaries around what relationships should be and what they actually are. And I was brought up in that, and it never fitted for me. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, it just didn't fit. I even gave it a real go early on in my 20s, getting married for the first time, and it just didn't fit. You know, I was like square peg in a round hole, and it became obvious. You know, and it wasn't that I rebelled, I was doing my very best to fit in, but it just didn't fit, and therefore it didn't work. And, you know, many years of processing and programming after that, you know, and healing and all the alternative new age things. Later, now I look back at it and go, look, the fundamental problem was I was a square peg in a round hole, or a stranger in a strange land. And that a lot of these boxes, you might call them, that we call relationship, you know, or a lot of relationships are actually boxes that people are trying to fit in. At least that was true for me. And that was a profound realization when I finally understood that a lot of, and it's only recently, by the way, you know, this is 40, 50 years onwards, you know, that I've realized, oh my God, relationships, as we use the word relationships, are usually well defined. People have their lists and their ideas about what they're going for, and when you enter the world of human design, as I have over the last 7 years, this starts to not work. You know, you have to reevaluate, you know, the traditional ideas of what relationships are, not because they're wrong or right, but because when you're a unique individual and you start allowing yourself to be that, and you meet other individuals who you want to be unique or who are attempting to find their uniqueness, what happens is you can't just go into a relationship. You've got to start with relating. And, you know, and let whatever the nature of the relationship is between you, whether it's in business or friendship or personal, let that relationship evolve and define itself and create its own boundaries. And when you have a world full of individuals, then the possibility of what a relationship can be is as vast as the number of combinations possible with 7 billion individuals, all relating to multiple people, you know, on all sorts of levels. As I said, family, friendships, business, intimacy, you know, marriages, not marriages, you know, sexual interaction, intellectual interaction, emotional interaction, you know, cultural interaction. Oh my, you know, the number of possibilities of what a relationship can really be is vast. And that can be threatening and scary and confusing, you know, to certain parts of who we are, particularly our mind that loves to have relationships ordered, you know, because it's better for it, you know, to figure out how to survive in life and figure out how to make all this complexity work. And so to understand even that point, we need to go back in history. And I had to go back in my own life into an exploration of how we evolved as human beings. Not that I deliberately did it, it's just that's what unfolded in my life. And I look back on it now and it's like all throughout my life I've been learning, you know, what happened to human beings, you know, where did we come from? Where did I come from? What's my ancestry, both physically and spiritually? You know, those are things that I didn't go chasing. At certain points I did a little, but basically they chased me. And what I discovered is physically we've gone through some major evolutions as human beings and spiritually as well, you know, in our relationship with whatever's out there, you know, whether you call it the divine or, you know, you believe there is a God or there isn't a God or whatever, you know, whatever's out there, you know, whatever's around us that we don't know about yet, you know, that we would like to get to know more about, you know. That's our spirituality, our relationship with what's out there that's more than us, that's, you know, that we can grow into, that can help us, you know, that is good for us. I'm keeping it as simple as possible. Right, so here we go. And my exploration showed basically this. Human beings developed on this planet about 5 million years ago, plus or minus, whatever, you know, it depends, but say quite a few million years ago, 5 to 10 or around that, human beings, hominoids, evolved on this planet out of millions, even billions of years of evolution on this planet, from rocks to the planet itself beginning to evolve, to life turning up on Earth, to, you know, life in the ocean, vegetables, plants, life coming out of the ocean, you know, insects, birds, fish, blah, 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 dinosaurs, everything else that happened that we probably don't know about or do have a little inkling of. And, you know, mammals, and here comes human hominoids. And they were designed and put together in such a way as to be instinctual. And they made decisions from an instinctual level, which was, when we look at the world of nature, what we tend to see is survival of the fittest. And when we look through the windows of our mind and our analysis of what's going on, people like Darwin and other people came up with survival of the fittest. When you look at it from an instinctual point of view, yes, instinct is about how to survive. That's true. But it's in a different context than the way we look at it as human beings. At least that's what I'm understanding at the moment. You know, it's how to survive. For the point of it is so that you can exist. Because instinctive awareness develops around survival. That's where intelligence first emerged, you know, because to be intelligent, you know, to be conscious, to be aware is like, oh my God, you know, that one, I exist, and two, I want to exist. And all animals have that, as well as initial human beings. And instinctive decision making is not only a great way to survive, to stay alive, but the purpose of that, the purpose of staying alive was to experience existence, how, on whatever level you experienced it, whether you're a tree or a bee or a rock or an animal or a dinosaur or a mammal or a fish or a bird or whatever, to experience existence. You wanted to survive to experience that existence on whatever level that experience was absorbed by you. And it was very much absorbed, in general, moment by moment while you existed. And so that form of intelligence developed, and we still have it built into us. You know, that capacity is there. You know, you learn it on battlefields and martial arts to tap into that, where you have to survive in the now. But, you know, being in the moment and the beauty of existence also emerges out of that sort of thing. And then human beings, for whatever reason, and that's a whole story in itself that I've looked into, but maybe not relevant to now, developed to a new level, a very high risk, high return level, where we developed mental awareness. Now, the big advantage of this was the extremely rapid development of our brain and our mind. Extremely rapid, compared to the way in which brains and the connection with mind through the brain had developed over history. Now, it did make big breakthroughs in dolphin and whales and other things like that in the animal kingdom, but they evolved again in a very instinctual way, in a different way than we did as human beings. We took this, you know, it took even them 50 million years or more to evolve to where they were, and there was a lot of development before that. But human beings have developed these brains and minds in 80 to 90,000 years that are just like way out. I mean, compared to the animal kingdom, you know, they're right out there. They're very, very uniquely conscious and aware and different. That's what we have. And because of that, the nature of our relationships has evolved. See, for Neanderthals, for instance, or other hominoids, their relationship was very instinctive. We would call it maybe primitive, but it had its own intelligence to it. And it was very much in the now and in existence. And they did develop to a point where when someone ceased to exist, they felt that and they expressed that in certain burial rituals, but nowhere near to the extent that we do. Because we developed this mental awareness. And you know what the whales maybe did in 50 million years, and the dolphins and stuff like that over 50 million years, we've, in our own way, you know, different, but in our own way, done that in 90,000 years. High risk, high return. And so our relationships during that phase of our development took on a profoundly different purpose. Now, when our mind became the thing that we were developing, the way we put the pressure on it to develop mental awareness and mental evolution and brain evolution to the incredible rapid level that we did, is what happened is we put pressure on it by giving the mind the job of running our life in the physical world, i.e. making decisions. Now, the brain and the mind are not really designed for that. Mental awareness enables you to travel in, throughout time and space. It enables you to travel to other dimensions, to use imagination. It's brilliant for dreaming and visioning and thinking, coming up with new creative ideas. And as far as the physical world is concerned, it's great for observing and measuring and getting insight and even sharing its perspective. But it was never really designed to run the physical life, to be the one who made the decisions. It gave us an option of really stepping outside the physical life while still being physical and observing the physical life and, appreciating it and enjoying it, but it was never really designed to run it. And then it got given that job. And it's like, uh-oh, this friend of mine says, uh-oh, I'm out of my comfort zone. It was really, the mind was given the job that was right outside the box. And the reason for this, there's a form of mathematics that was taught several decades ago quite extensively in school called set theory. And one of the basic tenets of that is when you can never really understand a set, whatever set you're in, until you're outside the set. Then you can see the whole set, the whole realm that you're involved with. In other words, you have to step outside the box to understand the way the box, really works. You need to step outside of your society to really appreciate how your society works. You need to step outside your family to understand how the family really operates. What are the, forces at work there? What are the agreements that have been made between family members? This is in plenty of things. So the mind and the brain were forced to step outside the box of what they're normally doing. Now, the brain does interact with the body a lot more than the mind. And, but the brain in a sense relates to the mind and the body as well. But it was still, hold on, this is stepping beyond instinct. This is starting to think about things and make decisions based on those thoughts. And high risk. Now, look at 90,000 years of history, or at least the 7,000 or 8,000 years of histories that we remember and acknowledge. The outcome of that was incredible progress at incredible cost. High risk, high return. A lot of progress, a lot of suffering, a lot of human resources wasted. People put into slavery, people's lives being lost, tribes wiping out other tribes, just, outside the normal run of nature, where you don't get tribes of lions hunting down other tribes of lions and wiping them off the savannah. They just find their space and keep out of each other's space, But that's what we did. We went boom, 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 conquering and doing this, and all this stuff went on. Not good, not bad in the long run. It's just really intense, like being on a battlefield. And out of that, huge growth in mental awareness, huge development in the mind, huge development in the brain, and a lot more pain and suffering than the way life was really designed to operate. Definitely outside of what nature normally goes through when you really look at it, when you really look closely. When the studies on animals and the studies on nature at the moment are revealing a much greater world than just survival of the fittest. And the reason we came up with this theory that survival of the fittest is because the brain and the mind outside of their comfort zone were driven by how the God am I going to survive this? Just like if you were taken outside of your comfort zone, you know, thrown out on the streets in another country with no money, you know, it was like, oh, you know, you've got to survive, and many wouldn't. I've been in that situation several times, and you know, you've got to come up with a strategy. You've got to figure out what it's going to take. Now, I've never been in a situation where it was absolutely life and death, like being on a battlefield or something like that, but many people do. You know, starvation, other tribes coming over the hill, you know, limited resources, whether it's true or not, creating that in such a way in our societies. You know, people have had to really struggle to survive because it reflects what our mind is going through, and our relationships reflected that. Relationships became things like, if we can just make them solid and real and put them in a box and have very specific rules for what they do. And they all developed around, you know, if I can marry my daughter off to this kingdom, then we can stop fighting each other and fight together against other people. Oh, you know, I own this person. I can keep control in my life because, and that was what the mind was doing, developing strategies, active strategies to survive, and only keeping those ones that worked to some extent, you know, that worked in the real world. And so coming up with a theory of evolution that's based on survival of the fittest absolutely makes sense from the point of view of the mind having to run the show, because it was under huge pressure. And we grew and we grew and we grew. But we came to a point 200, 230 years ago where return on investment shifted. We outgrew that. Our evolution demanded that we put that approach aside because we've got the maximum return out of that possible without any more suffering and pain. I mean, it got to the point 40, 50 years ago where there were no winners. We go to war and the planet doesn't get destroyed. It'll survive it. But humanity as we know it would be wiped out or severely, severely thrown back into the past. And so it became obvious over the last 200 years that the more we applied the pressure to our mind to figure out what's going on in life, and then built our relationships around homogenizing them and getting everyone to conform and, you know, making people stick to them, no matter how the relating was going on within the relationship, because that at least kept the tribe and the society and the world together as best we could. That form of relationship has begun to break down, obviously around the world, because the very nature of the way in which we live our lives in the physical world and run our lives through making decisions has changed. And our bodies have changed to accommodate that and are in the process of changing even more over the next couple of decades and even beyond to align with that. And so our relationships are changing dramatically to reflect that. Now, it doesn't mean that instinctual awareness is out and mental awareness is out. What it means is we've developed both to the point where they're competent enough on their own to exist, and we can take the benefit from both, and therefore aspects of the relationships that we developed in both, you know, relating in the moment, being present with your partner and having some boundaries that, you know, work for you and the people that your partner relates to and all that sort of stuff. That's fine. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're not, you know, If it doesn't, if we don't hold it together and keep it rigid, you know, we'll die, or the mind will be on the losing side, which is where the mind doesn't want to be. I mean, look at chess. It's all about winning and not losing, but there are losers. And if you lose, you're defeated. And that means you don't survive in the mental hierarchy that was created. And who's got the best, even in the alternative and new age? Who's got relationships that are really great? Because my relationships are working. Mine are working when all yours aren't. Let me teach you about them so that you'll survive, or that you'll have a great relationship and you'll be amongst the elite. And maybe eventually one day in the future, who knows, maybe everyone will get it. Mind. Wonderful idea, maybe. But if we all learn to live correctly and do, you know, handle our relationships and our conflicts, you know, the right way and in ways that, you know, that's all changing. Because two big trends are coming in now for the last 200 years, but we're only waking up to it in the last decade or two, or the last couple of decades. It started maybe 40 years ago, you know, when I was young and we were hippies, you know, free love, you know, the emphasis being on free to love, and with freedom to love, what we didn't realize at that time comes responsibility. Uh-oh, we've got to be responsible, and that means freedom to love in a way that responds to who we truly are. That leads to powerful relationships. But actually the first thing it leads to is powerful relating. And that is the key. We have moved now from a time when we need relationships as they were defined, as a means to the whole agenda of the last 80 to 90,000 years. Development of mental awareness and the mind surviving, going through a workout that was outside its comfort zone, so it can get back to its comfort zone stronger, more clear, more ready to explore, ready to soar. But you needed to go through the learning experience and survive it. And so much about relationships, it wasn't just instinctive survival. It was like, I'm trying to keep my head above water. I'm trying not to drown here. I'm trying not to be a loser. I'm trying to win. I want to have great relationships. And then the genetic imperative and all the other factors involved in who we are as well, you know, genetic imperative, sex. Boy, if you can control that, then I can get on top. I can get everyone worried about their sexuality, not loving it, not enjoying it. You know, we can get them concerned about it and then focused on it. And while they're doing that, I can set things up to my advantage. And this developed and developed. And boy, did we press all this to the extreme. I mean, human beings, gosh, we've pushed the limits on so many things. The use and abuse of power. You know, how to control other people, how to control ourselves, you know, sitting in the forest for 1,000, you know, austerities, cleansing, control our health. Oh God. I mean, I've done them all. Seriously. And it's like, they have their place, and it's not like we're going to never fast again or never cleanse or, you know, never have, you know, appropriate boundaries on our sexuality. It's not like that. It's just that it was all done with this thing of, you know, there was this underlying thing of the mind having to run the show and keep it together outside its comfort zone. It wanted to survive. It didn't want to lose. It was all about finding the strategies to win. But now it knows enough about that, we can ease off. And that's a huge thing. The mind goes back to being able to be free. Our relationship with our mind is one of freedom. It's now strong enough to go explore whatever our minds, other dimensions, insight, observe, and it's now developed enough to truly appreciate the world we live in, to observe it, to measure it, to get insight to it, to share your perspective of the world, your unique perspective of the world, not have to conform to a perspective of the world, not have to think the way other people think, because if you don't all row the boat the same way, you won't survive. You won't be in the winning team. Now that's great if you're in a competition, right? No problem, But hold on, relationships don't have to be a competition. They don't have to be, unless that's what you really love. You can be instinctive. You can care. You can nurture. You can be mentally alive more than we've ever been, because our mind is now free to soar in the realms of imagination, in the realms of creativity, as well as sit back in this body and enjoy the beauty and the magic of this actual physical existence, this body and the world that we live in, without having to feel obliged to interfere, to absolutely appreciate the beauty of it as it is, as it unfolds. And then the interaction between those two things, as the awareness develops, because now the whole thing is not surviving the experience or just existing and surviving so that you can exist. Well, then surviving the experience and growing mentally. It's now about the development of awareness. And I'm seeing that our whole understanding of what awareness is so small compared to what it's becoming. The awareness of the beauty of this life, of what it is to exist and to be alive and to have a mind that can soar and to have a body that moves through this reality. Call it an illusion, call it the Maya, call it the real world, whatever you like, that can move through this reality in harmony and in sync, consciously aware of the beauty of how it's all put together and the agendas that are going on genetically and in the mechanics of the whole thing. Incredible, agendas that are going there, and yet filled with consciousness, filled with, my experience anyway, is the more aware you become of it, the more you see how filled with love that life is, how the fundamental nature, internally and externally, is an expression of love. That's my experience. I don't know, I'm not always there, but I've been blessed in my life to be able to be consistently returning to that. And it's just like, whether you apply it to science and business, or whether you apply it to metaphysics or spirituality, or, exploring other dimensions, to realize that, at the core of this, to become aware of the beauty of this and how it works mechanically and practically and everything as well. But when you have that sense of awareness of that, how that awareness changes everything, even changes the world we live in, changes your body, changes your health. It's good for us. And that's what the prime directive now, it's not to keep our head above water and survive. It's not to just exist and have that experience without any, it's to exist and survive and to appreciate and enjoy the beauty. And relationships, how they're evolving, are going to be an expression and reflection of that. Now, that was a bit of a long history lesson, but oh my God, when you do begin to tap into that in your unique way, not in my way, I'm just sharing it so that it may inspire you or assist you, But when you do tap into that, life takes on a whole other meaning, you know, and relationships start to reflect that. And, you know, it's not that you become, oh, off in this world where you're not aware of all the crap and the nightmares that are going on in this world. Probably more than ever, I am aware of that. Nor are you, you know, beyond the mediocrity. More than ever, I'm aware of that. And I know when I'm in it, and I know when it's around me. You know, I'm not sort of numb to that, so I pretend it doesn't exist. But you also have access to this, you know, what people have dreamt of is possible. The dream that motivated this shift way back whenever it happened, that we took this high risk, high reward approach as human beings, this awareness of, you know, the magic and the beauty of life and how it's fundamentally based in love, not as a theory. It's nice to be able to say it, but when you feel it, when you experience it, when you see that your life is founded on that, often in ways that you can't understand until you experience it, that your mind never really grasps, but it constantly surprises and delights you. When you have that, now that is what is the new foundation of relationships. And in that, it's not the relationship as a box or as a defined entity that's important. That evolves naturally because you create it. You create it. It's not created for you by other people or cultures or religions or higher beings or gods or whatever. It's you create it. And the gods or God delights in your creation. Woo, that's my experience. Wow, look at that. You know, greatest gift you can give them is to entertain them with your life, if they exist. You know, if they don't, you might as well entertain yourself with your life anyway. You know, I mean, so in that thing, in that context, what I discovered was some very interesting stuff. One, the old relationships are oppressive and they don't work for a lot of people, not everybody, but, you know, having that sort of doesn't work for an awful lot of people because, you know, there's so much of people going outside that, looking for other things, where from as simple as cheating on your partner to, you know, being celibate, you know, and all these extremes of, you know, it's just, it doesn't quite work. You know, so where do we go from here? Well, it's not eliminate relationships, it's just start from the foundation. Start from the foundation, because we've changed, then our ways of relating will have changed. So let's go on a journey of discovery of how do you relate? Who are you and how do you relate? And then it moves into, so the first thing is, in a sense, now not everyone starts from here. Some people start from relating to others, but one part of it is relating to yourself. You know, who are you and how do you relate when you're being who you truly are? And there's a lot of different things that have helped us with that. For me, human design has been, wow, such a help, such a clarifier, so much insight as to who am I and how do I really relate when my mind isn't running the show, because I relate very differently when my mind feels obliged to take control and run my life. The way I relate there is not something I meant, I'm particularly happy with or fulfilled by, except in short bursts on odd occasions, and not that proud of in a lot of cases. And pretty much from what I see, we've all been there. And there's nothing wrong with learning through making mistakes, except the mind doesn't like that. At least the logical part of our mind is aiming for perfection, and it doesn't like mistakes too much, although it can learn that it's okay to learn from them, but it never feels really great about it when your mind is running the show. It much prefers not being vulnerable to our weaknesses and our mistakes, and I'd like to be seen to be together, because in the mind's world of having to survive, being outside its comfort zone, that has better results. But in the world that we're now moving into, to not show up as you really are, with your not self, with your vulnerabilities, with your weaknesses, you miss out on so much. Because there's so much to learn. Mistakes, when you're learning from them, whereas wins, huge wins. And I know even in the pickup community, one thing I really admire about them is they go out there and make tons of mistakes. And the beautiful thing is, because they do that, something quite unique in them emerges. A certain sort of confidence, a certain sort of, a devil may care about life, a certain attractiveness emerges out of that. A certain, I learn from everything attitude to life. There's a certain beauty in that, that is attractive and is, liberating. So does that mean we all should become pickup artists? No, I'm just saying that, it's just that there's so much showing up in the things that we sort of frown on, or at least from my background, Catholic background, 66 years ago. I don't know about this. Polyamory. I mean, the one thing I see about that is sort of relationship, the form, the box gets thrown out the window, and you've got to. I mean, when you have a lot of friends, and when you have a lot of friends that may be even in different cultures, or a lot of people who are different than you, the challenge, the one thing that tends to go out is the form of relationship. And what starts up is relating. And this is what I discovered that first, for me anyway, there was this getting a sense of yourself and your existence, and the fact that you have a mind, and it does feel obliged to run the show, but that there's more. There's an alternative. There's a deeper reality than that. And that I'm something that's emerging. I'm not all figured out. There's a lot more to discover about me in terms of relating to myself. And so that I'm always learning. And this is something that's happening everywhere in the world now, is you never stop learning, even in work and in business. Things are changing so rapidly. So there's that. And then there's relating to the world around you. And then there's relating to the world beyond you. You might say the places your mind can take you to that aren't in this world, or that at least we're not aware of with our physical senses. And then there's relating to the other, another, or others. And there's all these dimensions. So way back I heard about the ultimate relationship, which was when you get your relationship with yourself together, and your relationship with the physical world together, and your relationship with the worlds beyond together, and your relationship, or with your spirituality, whatever you want to call it, and then your relationship with the others together, and all four are juggling around, and they're all happening. That leads to what's ultimate in relationship. But again, when all four of those are juggling, the old ideas and the old boundaries and the old structures of relationship get at least shaken or stretched or developed or shattered sometimes. Now, beyond that, then I started to discover through other things that I was doing through developing my work in numerology and then in astrology, that, and there's this famous thing in a course that I'll be putting together in the future called Compatibility Magic. One day I had this noble thought, you know, how can I create rapport with a girl in a nightclub in less than 5 seconds, right? And out of the blue, a whole bunch of things whizzed in my unique mind and popped out this whole thing about compatibility between star signs, you know, zodiac signs, Sagittarians and Libras, for instance, and the fact that in a relationship, it can work, any relationship can work if you can resolve your differences. Now, similarities definitely help a relationship. Absolutely. I mean, it's much less stressful in a lot of cases to be with similar, whatever it is, similar nature, similar this. I mean, look at just the difference between men and women, you know, that's a challenge, you know. And I remember once getting on a boat with a whole group of men going on a men's weekend out to sea and going, why do I feel so relaxed? Why is everyone so chilled? And suddenly you go, oh, there's no women here. It's like, oh, I suddenly realize there's a certain level of tension where men and women come together. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that similarities can give you a chance to really relax and develop things and stuff like that. But differences, if you can resolve the differences, then the magic that's possible and the growth that's possible and the evolution that's possible, the synergy that's possible is incredible. And so for a long time, when we were in the mind running the show, it was trying to group everybody together and make them similar so that they could survive as a group and fend off the challenges from outside, and everyone had to conform and everyone had to be the same, even though they weren't, or at least same enough so you didn't rock the boat. But over time, that always seemed to kill the magic. And the development that happened in the early years of that relationship, that culture, that society sort of petered out. Whereas what I discovered when I developed this technique of, you know, literally it's so simple as comparing sun signs and looking at the difference between them so that any sun sign can work with any other sun sign. There aren't compatible and uncompatible. There are similar and unsimilar, but all of them are capable of being compatible. And so rather than seeing our differences as a problem, now we're seeing our differences, or at least in my life, what I've discovered is our differences are the opportunity for incredible magic together if both of us are willing to work with them. Now, if someone isn't, then you can at least get some magic out of it by you working on it until it doesn't work. But if both of you do, wow, 1 + 1 = 11, not 2. It really takes off. The magic that's possible there is incredible. And what this does is give us permission to allow each other to be different, because in allowing each other to be different, we're increasing the possibility of magic. And what I'm experiencing, look, I've been doing this for 40 years now, and 7 years in human design. And 7 years into it, I'm finally really getting, through my experience of working with clients and working with friends, working on human design, I'm really getting these fine distinctions on, oh my God, how different and unique I am, how I'm designed to work in a completely unique way in this world that other people don't understand often. And that my friend or my business partner or my partner is actually really different. And they don't see the world, they don't experience the world, they don't see me the way I see myself. They see it through their own filters. And as gradually, one of my friends and I have worked really deeply on this, we're beginning to grok each other as being so different and understand those differences. And it's, after a while, you stop trying to change or correct them. You start stepping back and appreciating their difference, and then seeing what you can do with the difference. And that's where you access this incredibly powerful energy called the energy between. Now, this is beginning to be known in metaphysics, and the cutting edge of metaphysics. It's been around for a while, and it's definitely, they're exploring it in science and nuclear physics and atomic physics and all that out there physics. You know, the energy that lies between things is an incredible source of energy, even though it appears like there's nothing there. You know, scientists have demonstrated that if you could extract the energy between two atoms, you could extract and develop and access more energy than if you took every atom in the universe and split it like they do in an atomic bomb. There's vast amounts of energy there. You know, theoretically, we're beginning to even give it a name, like dark energy and dark matter. And in metaphysics, sometimes they call it 0-point energy and various other forms of it. This is the energy between. And when we access that by allowing ourselves to be different, and then that energy between us is the differences distilled, and then working with that, then you can start relating to each other as unique individuals. Rather than fighting over the differences, you start really exploring how different you are and then how different they are. And this is where the development of awareness becomes so crucial. This is where the pressure is on us now to develop awareness, that working with that energy in between forces you to become more and more and more and more aware on subtler and subtler, on more obvious levels too. Sometimes it's not subtlety that we're missing the obvious. You know, our mind has become so good at exploring the subtleties of certain things, ignoring the subtleties of other things, and really ignoring the obvious. You know, I mean, there's tons of examples of that throughout history, throughout politics, throughout everyone's individual lives. How, you know, we overlook the obvious in so many things. So developing awareness, you see the obvious differences between you and the obvious opportunities and the subtleties, but not just the subtleties of a certain bias of, you know, say scientific or metaphysical or spiritual or, you know, emotional, or, but you begin to see the subtleties of how the emotional relates to the physical, relates to the spiritual, relates to this, that, you know, that this, you know, this person's talent in this area, you know, it's so different and hard to relate to, but there's an obvious gift there, or there's an obvious thing they can bring to the table in your business or in your relationship. You can obviously explore your intimacy, your sexuality in a whole new dimension, in a whole new way, rather than just conform to porn, or, you know, conform to what you've been brought up to, just having kids, or, you know, what you're supposed to do to show that you're performing as good as other people. You know, all that stuff out the window. And what the hell is possible here? And beyond that, then I developed that into this whole thing, an ebook that I wrote that I'm going to republish in the future, called Sexual Fusion, which is not just about sexual fusion, but it's really about the fusion, the magic that can be created in any form of relationship where you get deeply intimate with each other, even in business, where you get deeply authentic and real with each other. in business, for instance, or in friendship, or in family relationships, where you start to parent the child as a unique individual and you give the best of what you have, but you don't impose that on top of their individuality. You present it in a way that respects and understands, or at least explores and discovers their individuality and what that has to offer you. So being able to identify the differences between us, that's something I've developed, which I'll put out as a program in the future. You know, that really helped me understand, you know, how the Sagittarian works with the Gemini, and, you know, what the opportunity is there. And there are other ways and approaches to do this. That's just my particular bent on it. But when you find a way of clearly identifying and appreciating the differences between people, and then bring them together and use them rather than fight to see who. See, when the mind's in there, it's got, I've got to get on top of the other person. They're different than me, but, you know, if I'm going to be valid, then I've got to fight for my point of view and at least not cave into theirs. Or if I do cave into theirs, I've got to go along with theirs completely so I can survive. It's like, I have my point of view, and it's wildly different and unusual and eccentric, or maybe very conservative, but down to earth. And I have that, and they have theirs. And, you know, when you put those two together, what do you get? Or those three, or those four, or those five. And that's where the journey of discovery and the development of awareness becomes so powerful. Because you're on a journey of discovery. You're not trying to conquer. You're not trying to be on top. You're not trying to survive outside your comfort zone. You're in your comfort zone as a human being. Your body's comfortable in the world. Your mind's comfortable in its world. They're working together. And the whole experience of life becomes, oh my God, what can I discover here? What underlies this? What is possible in it? What can I bring to the table? What do other people bring to the table? Oh my God, the skill of relating becomes a huge asset. Developing the ability to relate, and not relate the way everybody else is always relate, because that's what keeps society quiet and under control. And, you know, we're all doing it the same way. And, you know, it's like, we're not putting stress on each other. It's realizing that as we unwind from the fact that we no longer really are designed to stress each other out and struggle for survival, but we're really here to develop awareness, then to just, oh, let's discover what's possible here. And honestly, for me, I feel like I'm the edge of the age of discovery. You know, we discovered the new world when people sailed out from Europe, at least a new world for them, the people in Europe. It wasn't a new world for the people living in the new world, it was just their world. You know? And then they discovered there was a whole other world out there. And oh my God, and then they started, everyone fought about it, because some idea has to dominate here. Some religion has to dominate here. Oh, we don't believe in dominance. We're tolerant of all. Well, we don't. Oh my God, now we do have to survive. So, you know, everyone's forced into that mold. And now it's like, if we keep going that direction, we'll end life as we know it. We might as well end life as we know it, consciously and awarely, by discovering the magic there, the opportunity that's there, and grabbing those opportunities. I mean, there are people out there in the world, their way of relating to the world is, let's drag it all back into the past and kill off anybody who, you know, and that's one approach. You can fight all this. Or the other approach is you can go, well, let's discover what's possible if we all respected and loved each other, and started at least going into the uncomfortable but fascinating world of going beyond our mind's idea of things and started to discover the obvious and started to discover the subtleties of the uniqueness of who we are. And in that area, it's not about relationships. They'll emerge. It's about relating. And then the next step for me was beyond the sexual fusion thing, and then doing a whole thing on compatibility magic, which didn't work then, but will work in the future. We were just developing it, or I was just developing it. The next step was whole of human design coming into my life, and realizing with all this knowledge about, oh yeah, there was a whole other thing too, and what legends and stories can bring, and my exploration of the Arthurian legend and how they took it to that point of discovery but were ahead of their time and it fell back. But out of that emerged maps of what it is to be truly feminine and what it is to be truly masculine, and how, hold on everyone, different they are. Totally different. And yet the magic they can create together when they use the differences rather than one tries to deny the differences of the other, you know, chauvinism, where the feminine gets denied, but then the masculine gets castrated because it's got no access to the power of the feminine. That doesn't work, and we've seen that in history. And then the feminine is coming along and we're going to beat men at their own game. And we've seen that that sort of leaves men, you know, not really growing up properly. Because, you know, what women need to do is get in touch with the power of what it is to be women, the power of true feminine energy. They have access to the power. It's what to be feminine is. And men, they have strength. And you bring that power and that strength together, and the feminine shares the power and empowers the masculine and becomes strong. And then he uses that strength to not only protect and support is the best word, support the feminine, but support the creative energy of the feminine, because it produces more power, which they both get to share and enjoy. And this incredible magic that comes where power isn't fighting with strength, where strength is trying to keep the power down but losing its power, and power isn't misinterpreted as I'm as powerful as men or better, and then the men never grow. But then when we go, hey, we are the power, we are strong, let's share and let's become powerful and strong together. And what comes out of that power and strength? But real beauty, magic, and ultimately real love. And that real love doesn't have a defined form for relationships. It loves to relate and give birth to a relationship that supports and enhances that relating, so it can relate more deeply, more profoundly, and grow more fully. And then it reforms the relationship to complete to support the growth of that magic and beauty and love. And then it reforms again as each person grows within it. And just like our jobs, you know, rather than, oh, I've got my job and I've got my job for life with the same company. Well, it's the same thing. Well, I'm married and I'm married for life. And you may be. But even within that, you have to get retrained all the time. Even if you have the same job for life, you know, you've got to be, the internet came along, you've got to be trained in the use of internet technology, and then, you know, the use of smartphones, and then and God knows what will come up in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that's an expression, it's not a comment, that God knows. It's just like, you know, it's one thing we know, it's going to be extraordinary. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be challenging. We're going to have to grow with it. And so relationships need to have that sort of fluidity and flexibility. And, you know, because what at first happened with the hippies and even later with polyamory, it's so easy to fall back into dressing it up as spiritual, but really it's just guys and women trying to breed as much as possible so we all survive. You know, instinctive awareness, or the mind I'm trying to get with the best group of people and the right group of people so that we're on top of the whole relationship field. No, it's just like, wow, what an opportunity to, gosh, I've got to relate. I'm really in an intense life or workshop, if you want to call it that, of relating. And then, or you might find it for you, it's perfectly fine just to spend a lot of time relating to yourself or one other person or an intimate group of people. Who knows what works for you? You have a unique design. And one thing I love about, again, human design is if you want to explore that, you can explore, you know, what are you suited to? Working on your own, working with small group of people, or with one person, other person, or a small group of people, or a large group of people. Now that's being applied to business. But once we loosen up with relationships, so relationships can be appropriate to the people who are relating, then you begin, oh my God, I'm really good at just relating to myself, and then maybe sharing that with others, but as myself. Oh, I'm really good with one other person. That really suits me. I'm designed for that. Oh no, small groups. Oh no, large groups. And variations between that. And there's much more freedom there because we're not so desperate to breed. You know, there's enough people around, and there'll be even more before it planes out. And it will. I mean, all the research on this is showing that it will plane out around 11 billion people. So it's not just driven by, I've got to prove myself. It's like, what enables me to develop more and more awareness? What form of relating? And what allows me to create more magic, more fun, more appreciation of the beauty of life? What in me enables me to give of myself? What sort of relationships are best for me giving of myself? Really amazing questions that put the pressure on. The more aware you are, the more options you'll have, the more you'll see the decisions that are presented to you. And because decisions are connected to choice, the more real choice you'll have, not mentally thought up choices about things that you would like to happen that are somehow disconnected from what really is happening in your life. I keep remembering something one of my great friends and teachers said many, many times when they're talking about reality creation. They say, you always get what you want, not necessarily what you ask for. I thought about that and I went, you always get what you want, not necessarily what you ask for. And the principle in that is that we are creating our own reality, or some part of us is. You know, we are creating this reality. It's not a matter of I've got to learn to create my own reality. We are creative forces in this reality. Look, if you believe in a higher power, it's gifted us that ability to be the creators of our own reality. If you don't, well, we are creating our own reality. I mean, you look around it and people make whatever they do of their lives. And we're always getting what we want, really want, because why would we create it any other way than the way we really want it? And people go, yeah, but people have horrible lives and stuff like that. Are you saying that they really, on some level, that is what they want to experience at that point? Maybe it's just purely instinctive, maybe it's whatever. I mean, this is a deep subject. But the point I'm making is, if you get what you want, and not necessarily what you ask for, it fits with the mind's asking for this, and the mind's asking for that, and the mind's asking for this over here. And it's got this idea about that, and someone else told it should do that, and everyone else in my group is doing this, so why shouldn't I do that? And da 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 da. And then there's what's really happening in your life. And learning from that what it is at least you want at the moment. And if you want that to change, once you've acknowledged what's going on at the moment, then change is what's going on. You acknowledge it. You forgive yourself if it's not what you really want. You celebrate it if it is what you really want. And then change inevitable. That when you ask for what you really want, you always get what you ask for. It's like when you get to the point where you really acknowledge that what you have is what you want, and you want maybe it's a change. And then you ask, really do. It's very deliberate. It's coming from knowing the depths of who you are and how you are designed for. So you're not fighting life. You're not fighting the program. You're not fighting your subconscious. You're not fighting your unconscious. You're acknowledging all of that, and you're acknowledging your design and what you're designed for in life and stuff like that. And you developed a real awareness of how beautiful life is and who you are and whatever. And then you all in the midst of that, what do you really want? And it comes out of your design. It comes out of your spirit. It comes out of your subconscious and unconscious, because it is you. And you ask for that, and guess what? You get it. So if you want the relationships that you really want, get in touch with the uniqueness of your design. Get in touch with making decisions with something other than your mind, so that the mind is free to do its real job now that it's developed. So these are the huge trends. My God, we're not making decisions with our mind. That sets me on a path where I start moving through the world the way I'm designed to. I start being where I'm supposed to be and being who I'm supposed to be. And that's obviously what I want. But if I'm aware that there's more, and I long for that, and it's a true longing, and you ask for that, that has to emerge. When you ask for what you really want, you get what you ask for. You've got to know who you really are and what it is you really want, which is encoded in the very nature. It's all the hints and clues are in who you really are. Because that's what you wanted to be. That's what you are. Okay, and then the longings, the dreams, the visions. And when it's right, the timing is right. When it's right for your design to emerge in that, that comes to you. You become aware of that. You start to relax into this. And then the relationships. And here's the real key to starting a relationship on the practical level. Enter into a relationship according to your strategy and your inner authority, with all the stuff that I've only just glanced over in this conversation, in this webinar, just the highlights of it, with all the intricacies and the practicalities and the techniques and stuff that I've developed in my own life over the time, that I'd published, put out there. And the timing wasn't right, because I was going, I want to get this out because people need to hear this. This will help. And either I wasn't ready, they weren't ready, timing wasn't right, whatever. With all that was like, and all those things that I'd written and done and developed, none of which is wasted, but everything was definitely a fantastic experience for me. And when it's right, if it's right, it will come out. When I'm ready and when people are ready. And in all that, the one thing that I hadn't got was if you don't start off on the right foot, if you don't enter into a relationship correctly, according to the way you make decisions according to your strategy and your inner authority, according to your true self, then you've started off on the wrong foot and probably in the wrong relationship, which is going to send you down the wrong path and is ultimately going to be frustrating or get you angry or make you bitter or disappoint you. And then the mind gets into surviving by blaming everybody else or blaming yourself and processing it for years and years. And there's value in processing by all means, but not the way some of us, the way I've done it sometimes, which is processing and processing. It's like, no, enter it correctly. You start off on the right foot and keep taking the relating and the development of the relationship according to your strategy and your inner authority. You'll never regret it. It'll be whatever it unfolds to be, whatever it needs to be for you and the other person at that time. And even if it just lasts for one day or one night, you'll walk out there with no regrets. That's my experience. And if it develops for a lifetime, you won't be sitting there 40, 50 years later, like many couples, not all, there's some wonderful couples out there, but they're just grinding along. The magic's gone, but you know, we're used to being together. You know, when you go according to your strategy and your inner authority, you give the relating and the relationship, the development of the relationship, a chance. And that has been the absolute, slowing down and letting that happen has been the biggest lesson in relationships for me in the last 4 or 5 years. It's been huge. And some of the relationships that turned up I would never have imagined or even wanted, or you know, if I'd been thinking my way through it, I would have run for the hills. But just allowing them to come up and then run their course and do what they need to do and develop into long-term or short-term friendships, or end not so well, but coming out of it a better person on both ends, or learning how not to hurt another person in the future and seeing where you do it, seeing your weaknesses and your strengths. It's an awesome thing. So we're now in the age of discovery of the nature of relating. That's, you know, a summary of what relationships are about. The age of becoming aware of how to discover what, you know, how to relate, and from that relationships will emerge. Awareness, discovery, relating. They're the 3 things that will give birth to the new relationships that are emerging now, just beginning to emerge. The seeds, the beginnings, the possibilities of them, just beginning to emerge. But in the future will become, you know, the foundational connections within the new world, within a world that is new, that is unlike the world we came out of, that we've been living in the last, at least as far as we know, 7,000 years, tens of thousands of years. Very different, very beautiful. Big payoff on what we went through. Maybe we'll look back and go, God, I went through that. Am I crazy? But sometimes there's method in the madness, you know. Now it's time to reap the rewards. And it's challenging and it's scary, you know, just like it's challenging and scary to win the lottery. But we're on the verge. So hopefully this has been helpful or inspiring in you winning your lottery of relationships in your life now and in the future. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. Feel free to contact me, any comments, or if you want some assistance or want to work with me, more than happy to do so. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this time with you. See you again soon.